This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. I have such admiration for tonight's guest. Not only is he the writer of a funny, insightful play now at Primary Stages, but he's one of the great wits, and I'm very pleased he's here with us. To introduce him, a minor light of witticism, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
All right, you better deliver the witty goods, Charles, after that setup. I'm very happy to have with us tonight Charles Grodin, a fine actor, a fine talk show host, and a terrific playwright whose new play, The Right Kind of People, which is about a New York City co-op board, has just opened at Primary Stages here in New York. Charles Grodin, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you. Weren't there supposed to be cue cards with some witticisms right behind you?
Where's your joke writer?
Yeah. Right. Wait a minute. Where are the wit cue cards?
We expect extemporaneity
All
from
right,
you,
let me see. Give me a question. Let me see if I can be witty.
All right, well, what I like
wit
about...
falls out of me like, like other people say hello.
What I like about this play is you seem to be settling some scores with people that you may have dealt with in real life on a co-op board. This is a play about the sort of appalling behavior of people in fancy buildings in New York, and I get the sense it's based on your own experience. Is that true?
Now, you've read the play, I'm taking. I don't know what version you read, maybe an early version, later version, because I've been working on it for 10 years.
And I
realize that's not witty. That's just a factual response, so forgive me. Well, yes, I lived on Fifth Avenue. I was on a Fifth Avenue co-op board, and I was struck by some of the things that were being said in judgment of people that wanted to get into this Fifth Avenue building, and that's what got me right away starting to take notes. And right away, people thought, God, he's industrious. They thought I was just taking notes.
You were the secretary for the meetings.
Yeah, like I was like the recording secretary of something, but I was really...
Oh, you're sitting...
Well, I mean, the first thing that I heard was they were commenting on somebody who wanted to move into the building or buy an apartment, and they said he gets his clothes off the rack. And I realized it wasn't a joke. And I said, oh, I get my clothes off the rack. They said, we know. And right there, I thought, gee, this is going to be interesting. And I just kept my ears open. Now, so some of it is personal experience. None of it is made up when it comes to board stuff in this play. But a lot of it is gathered from brokers, one in particular, and attorneys in real estate in New York who gave me this information. For example, some people were kept out of, I'm talking about exclusive East Side buildings. I should be clear about that.
By the way, how did you, an actor, get into that exclusive East Side building?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. There was somebody, a very well-known person, an art dealer, who was moving off the board, and they wanted to have somebody that somebody had heard of on the board. And I didn't have any scandal or anything like that, and since I kind of have my reputation as someone who doesn't even leave the house very much, so they thought that was safe. Then later,
you were in a real show busy type.
No, and the rap on me is he would let anyone in, and I said, well, if you're not wanted by the police and you can afford it, I mean, it's not like it's a roommate.
Yes.
You never see anyone.
Yeah.
But a lot of the material in the play is gathered from information from other exclusive buildings and other exclusive co-op boards. For example, if they allow pets, it's 21 inches to the dog's shoulder in height and no more than 15 pounds, and they'll weigh them too. On the other hand, just so it's not like, because I didn't want it to be about settling scores, by the end of the play, there's a real case to be made for the board.
Yeah, yeah.
And that, I really wanted to be clear about that, because I was really influenced. My friend, the late playwright Herb Gardner, once was having a play at a major theater in London, and he was noticing all this security, and he went to the person in charge, I guess, is all this necessary, all this ID stuff, and they said to him, did you ever own anything this big?
Yeah, yeah.
So these people, this is, for a lot of them, their major asset,
Yeah,
but overwhelmingly their major asset, and they really don't want to get somebody in there, because buildings get reputations real quickly. I mean, we were nearby a building that Klaus von Bülow lived in. So, you know, and that may not be, you know, a good idea. So they are very careful, and the defense about the 21 inches of the dog's shoulder, well, they don't want, well, as the answer from the representative of the building management agency was, well, you wouldn't want to get on an elevator and have a Great Dane staring you in the face, would you? You really can make a case for much of what the board is saying.
Yes.
And what the play is really saying is that there's bigotry in everyone, including the people complaining about the bigotry.
Yeah.
And that's what it really asks you to look at. And while it's easy to say and make fun of these people, are you sure you don't have some of that in you?
And if you had that asset and you were on that board, you might then behave the same way.
You might.
Did you find yourself, when you went on the board, starting to behave like these people that you were laughing at?
No, because I'm so far the other way. I really would not exclude anybody unless there was some kind of overwhelming reason. So I was never, but I did understand, and some of the people to this day are my friends. Some of the people are gone because I think I left the board in the mid-90s, but I kept up all the research, so it's all current stuff, and nothing's changed. If anything, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this type of thing, when they don't accept you, they don't have to give a reason.
No.
And I just read in this particular building, which I don't name, that there's a lawsuit being brought against it by an Asian couple who feel that it was because they were Asian. So
well, you can't really say why you rejected them, because if you give the people you reject
then
anything,
you might be into some kind of violation of law.
And then they subpoena the minutes.
But so I don't. So, and
Subpoena your notes for the play.
They're trying to change the law, but it's kind of it's kind of like the private club. You know, and there's this thing that happened. Some relatives of mine in Kansas City went to some private club. This was within the last year, and that they didn't have any blacks or Jewish members, and somebody called out to this one person, this relative on my wife's side, what is this, Jew night? So this is this year. So it's not just co-op boards, it's everywhere. But I must say that everything that I saw and all my sources did come from the east side. It wasn't the west side. Now, I'm saying that for two reasons. First of all, it's true. None of these things, none of these reports are there. It was about Fifth, it was about Park.
Right.
But shortly just before this play opens, I happened to be going in front of a co-op board, buying an apartment in New York. I wish I was making this up. And I want to be very clear, if anybody on that board who I haven't met yet, this play is about the east side. It's not about the west. And it literally wasn't. There were no stories about this co-op on Central Park West. It was all
the east side.
And it wasn't all every place on the east side. It's these certain buildings in New York, on Fifth, on Park, and, you know, those exclusive buildings.
You're directing this play, too.
No, Chris Smith is directing, and he's the artistic director of the Magic Theater in San Francisco, where we started it. We actually did a showcase in New York, and then he became the artistic director, so we did it out there. What was interesting about it out there is they don't really have many co-ops in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's mainly rental.
But it's still sold out.
Yeah.
Not right away, but eventually the word of mouth caused that, and we've got.
So what was pulling them in?
I think it's a compelling play. I think you know, I have a lot of plays. That's what I've been doing a lot lately, and I look at this one and I say, this has got a lot. You know, it's like acting for me. I studied for 10 years, and so I've been really. Actually, the first thing I wrote that was produced in New York was in 1966. I co-authored a musical called Hooray, It's a Glorious Day, and all that. So it's not like I just started doing this. Way back in '66, I did that, and that was selling out. And then opening night, the producer, in his infinite wisdom, chose not to have paid the costume designer, and she took all the costumes. So the police had to be called, and the curtain was held, and you get one of these things, let's go, let's go, let's go. So that did not help.
Did you do it in street clothes?
Did
you do the play in street clothes?
No, they actually retrieved the costumes. But I think, you know, in fairness, I think it was Stanley Kaufman at the Times at the time. I think even if it had started on time, there would have been a resentment toward this play because of this musical, because what it was doing is it was satirizing cliches in the American musical theater. Certain things at that time that kept cropping up a lot, and it was resented by people who revere the American musical theater, which I'm one, but it wasn't mean-spirited.
Right. But you are a satirist. Would you consider yourself a
Well,
satirist?
I don't know. I'm not even sure what it is.
Well, I remember a play years ago I saw, this must have been 1990, 91.
Price
Forgotten
of
the title.
Fame.
Price of Fame.
Right.
Oh, I always liked that play, in which you were...
Well, I was in that
You
one,
were in that
and
play.
I wrote it.
And you
yeah,
wrote it. And it was about a Hollywood star having to act with a horse.
Well, no, it was a Hollywood star that opens up that he was told that the horse wasn't going to be in the ad with him in New York. In certain cities, the horse would be in the ad.
And this was Beethoven, right?
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the,
yeah.
the
Well,
dog.
this was before Beethoven.
Oh,
This
okay.
was-
And
this
So,
was-
so you were, that play was a prescient play in your career.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. But I don't even know the difference. Maybe you can tell me. I basically am trying to find humor in every situation because if it has something serious to say, which Price of Fame did, it was really about balancing a professional life with a personal life, and how much attention can you pay. And this one is a serious thing about bigotry, but for someone like me to write serious plays about balancing of life values and bigotry, I'd have to do it through humor.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
well.
that's just not, I just don't want to do it. Otherwise, write an essay.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
But I feel like my basic feeling about the theater is that everything feels too long, and so I really approach playwriting the way I approached when I would appear with Johnny Carson or Letterman. I never assume anyone is interested in anything.
So you
I
keep
think
it
that's
snappy and
a good
peppy.
policy.
So
yeah.
you want to, particularly if you have something to say, surround it with humor. But I'm not so sure about the difference between, you would think I would know this, but maybe you know it. You seem to know it. The difference between humor and satire. I don't even know.
Satire, as I think Kaufman says, what closes on Saturday night.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So I don't, satire, no, I'm not a satirist. Who said that? No.
Well, I mean, thinking back on the horse play,
Yeah.
it's kind of wry observations about the insanity of that particular
So would that
world.
make it satire
Yeah,
rather
to
than
some extent.
comedy?
I think so.
Satire would have an edge to it.
A little bit, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
well
yeah.
then maybe it is.
You know, tough observations about the lunacy
So
of the world that you're thrust
might
in.
move it over to that. You remember when George S. Kaufman at the end of his life would come out? I think it was not Jack Parr. It might have been Johnny Carson. He had had a stroke. He could barely speak. You may not be old enough to remember this.
Oh, I think that was Jack Parr. You're right.
Might have been
Yeah,
Jack
yeah.
Parr, and he came out. He could barely walk over there, and you could barely understand him. And they still had him come out. And I was really impressed with that. It was worth straining to hear what it was he said.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we were talking about the television industry before, and it's just such a shame they don't seem to have that sentiment so much anymore on television.
Yeah, you had
Yeah.
this sort of famous talk show on CNBC where all kinds of stuff was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
What is your opinion of talk shows today? Having been a famous talk show guest, having one yourself,
Yeah.
do you think the art of the talk show is
You
gone now?
mean like the cable talk shows, or
Yeah, just sort of talk shows in general.
Well, I
mean,
think we're
you
lumping them
well,
in.
well,
yeah.
the one thing on the cable, they have what they're doing there. Then you're talking about David Letterman and those kind of shows.
yeah,
you
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
I almost don't view those as talk shows anymore, although that you were a
Those
master
are
of
kind
that
of
form.
entertainment.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think the cable talk shows are really doing a great disservice to the country because it's so driven by how do we get a number
Yeah.
that you'll see Michael Jackson. We could be going to war,
Nonstop.
and they're doing hours on Michael Jackson or Natalie Holloway.
But do you think to some extent that they're doing Michael Jackson and Natalie Holloway also because they don't want to talk about the fact that we're going to war? I mean, I feel that that's being masked a lot.
Well, I think when Bill O'Reilly was talking so much about we got to, there's this big crusade in America to get rid of Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, as though it was the number one issue
the
in
war
America.
against Christmas.
I mean, you would just go on and on about that. I mean, I know to some people it's important.
Oh, he gets the ratings now.
No.
Well,
but where?
that's it. And I remember when I was at CNBC saying to another host, wouldn't you be interested in doing something on prison reform? Because I would
Yeah.
do a lot on that, or homeless, or hunger, and stuff like that. And he said, if anybody would watch. Well, I actually was taking the position that it was important to do it, even if the number wasn't going to be as high as an O.J. Simpson show.
Right, and maybe they'd come to it if
When
if
you were doing
did
your
it.
talk show on CNBC, was there this obsession about ratings numbers? Or were there producers saying you should do this topic, not that topic?
When Bill Bolster came in and Roger Ailes moved to Fox, he said to my producer, who now runs daytime at Court TV, I want to see all these shows he does that aren't the, if it might have been O.J. Simpson at that time still, I don't know, went on for so long, meaning if he's going to talk to people in a shelter or if he's going to go up to a prison and interview people. I want to see them get the same ratings as an O.J. Simpson show. Well, they don't.
They're not
Yeah,
going to.
yeah.
They don't. But I felt like that there still was this responsibility to cover important stories, and I mixed them in, but nobody else wanted to do that. Now I think nobody even considers it, because you see, I think otherwise serious people talking about, I mean, you still see Natalie Holloway's mother, with all due respect to this poor young woman, or the missing bridegroom from the yacht, as though these are the major issues in the world.
Right. Well, but that's what I'm wondering. They don't want to face the major issues in our world.
It could be that, or it could simply be driven by, they think more people by ratings. It just simply could be that. So I don't have I think that the whole, and they are all owned by conglomerates, and the conglomerates are in control, and then they're trying to own more. This is what got me thrown off the air. Because I feel even now, if I wanted to, I work for CBS News Radio right now, but if I wanted to say something about Viacom, I would.
But what got you thrown off the air?
Well, I think because I let Bobby Kennedy criticize GE, who owned the network that I was working on.
Yeah.
But I don't think like that, and I'll take the chance. But I think the minute you start worrying about who controls it, then don't bother being a journalist.
I remember that when Bobby Kennedy was criticizing GE. When you then lost the show, did someone come to you and say, this is the reason?
No.
They never really tell you.
No.
Is it hinted at? Is it just...
No. I mean, I actually was moved out of 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, which is like one step close to the door.
It's like the CoOp Board, right?
Yeah, that's right, like just moving them out, and what they replaced me with, it was like crazy, because I was following Geraldo, who was doing like interviewing
specials,
lawyers and all that, and then it was reruns of Conan O'Brien.
I remember
in prime time.
It's CNBC reruns of Conan O'Brien.
And I guess they would say we wanted to get younger demos, but that's not you had no lead-in audience, so it couldn't do anything.
Right.
There was no audience.
Yeah.
So they don't really tell you why they pulled the plug on a show.
Especially if they wouldn't want it to be announced. But I think there's just too much, it's everywhere. It's in the government, it's everywhere, that people just aren't answering these questions straightforwardly. But, and I can't, and I have problems, but I haven't had it with CBS News Radio. As I say, nobody says congratulations, but they do say, I do it from home, a microphone at home, and I mail in these commentaries on a disc. The only way I know they have any feeling about me at all is that when they call them to say, where's the disc? They don't say they like the disc.
Well, that's our relationship with Channel 13.
Why don't you do a sort of a trial run and launch an attack on Sumner Redstone and see how they respond to it?
See if anybody's watching, listening.
That would be interesting. I mean, if I had something to say, I probably, well, I have. I mean, I saw a major CBS correspondent being asked on Larry King how he feels about conglomerates owning more. And he openly said, I don't feel I should answer that question.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I'm just trying to not take shots at him because, I'm not looking to tear people down, but I do want to say that if you're on television and you're the host or the guest, you should be free to say what you want to say. That's what's called a free press. And agree or not, that's why I'm sure the Court TV wouldn't have a problem with Ron Kuby. But not when I'll tell Henry Schleif about it. He'll say, he did what? Well, he'll never be back.
We should say he was bashing Alito. We're on the eve of Alito's confirmation.
Bring it back to the theater.
Yeah.
You're writing plays, but it's been a while since you've appeared on the stage in New York. Do you want to go back to acting?
No.
Why not?
And, and a lot of my plays call for people around my age.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be perfect for some of these parts.
I feel really bad about it because I wouldn't do it. And here I'm talking to Gene Wilder or Alan Alda, people like that. I wouldn't personally do it.
Why?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you started on the stage.
I don't want to go to work at night. Not that I want to go to work during the day, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want to go to work for 12, 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I did all that, but the last play I was in was in 1975, was same time next year.
Really?
Yeah, and then I was directing and writing, but I wouldn't want to do it.
Really?
It's,
I mean, just
as
as,
an
artist,
you're like your late 30s or something?
Yes, thank you.
You'd be surprised.
5 years from now,
25 years from now, you say, I don't want to sit in some studio and talk to some guy who's got some off-Broadway play.
That's creeping up on me faster than you think.
Right in the middle of this interview.
Exactly.
How did I get into this?
Did you make a conscious decision to leave stage acting in 1975?
I made a conscious decision in 1975 because my contract was up. We had 4 weeks of rehearsal. We played in Boston out of town. I was 7 months in the run of Same Time Next Year. Mm-hmm. It was enough, and I left, and Ellen Burstyn, it was a 2-character play, left because I left, and the producer wouldn't throw a closing night party. They were so angry at me. I fulfilled the contract, and they thought I was leaving because I was going into a movie, but I was just going home.
Yeah.
I wasn't going into a movie.
But didn't they? Who
Oh yeah, then
you?
other people came in and did it, but they were very angry that I left. You know.
But you continue to write for the theater.
Well, that's what I like to do. I like to write for the theater. I've written for the movies too, and I've written specials. But I like to write for the theater. First of all, the odds that it'll get on are greater than getting $50 million for a movie. Yeah. And in fact, I've never written anything that hasn't gotten on, so that's encouraging to me. And I like the psychology, the interaction between people. That's what really interests me, and that's not movies.
Are you the kind of playwright who's present at all the rehearsals?
No,
he doesn't like to go to work. He told you this.
I know. I'm going today to see a run through. They're like sightings of me.
Well, that's the best kind of playwright to be.
I don't want to sit there. I've got the director's already directed it in San Francisco, although this is the New York cast that has been with it for years through various readings. But no, I'll go in and say, what I have to say. But no, I don't stay too much anywhere. In fact, what time is it now? I know that sounds like and I'm lonely. I never leave the house. I haven't had a party, and believe me, I did a thing recently, a benefit, or when it wasn't a benefit, I actually was paid to do this group, and people, well, most of the time I'm not paid. Most of the time it is benefit, but they offered. I said, really, they're paying? And it said, if you give $10,000, this was for a charity, you get to spend an hour alone with me in this. It was at some exclusive club up in Purchase, New York, and it said that at the bottom, $10,000 you get to spend an hour, just alone, so just talking with him. And I took that invitation, and I showed it to my wife and my son. Who have no interest in spending any time with me. And I said, people are spending $10,000 just to hang out with me, and they just looked at me and went to a different room.
Well, what sort of people spent the $10,000?
Wealthy people.
on the
who hadn't heard my wife. In fairness to my wife, I've been married 23 years, so she's pretty much heard what I have to say.
I have to ask you, King Kong is the big hit movie now.
Yeah.
I grew up watching the King Kong that you were in, 1977. Do you want to make the case that was the definitive King Kong?
I'll tell you, I did a commentary on it because when this new King Kong was coming out, they always cited the classic from '33 and the masterpiece that was coming. And if they ever referred to the '76 Kong, they always said, "Oh, that Kong." So I wrote the thing saying, "I'd like a little more respect for my Kong." I said we had Jessica Lange.
Yes.
The Kong didn't have to do much acting when he spotted her.
She was beautiful.
23-year-old Jessica Lange. We had Jeff Bridges, who's been in the movies forever.
Yeah.
I said I was in. I said I've got the credential. I said I'm too modest to say what they are, but they're there. The director had just directed The Towering Inferno.
It was a Dino De Laurentiis production.
Dino De Laurentiis production, and it was on television recently, and it's a perfectly fine Kong. And I just think it deserves more respect.
I'm with you on the King Kong. I love that one. I love the scene where King Kong is looking down and it's a little Charles Grodin and he steps on you, and then the foot goes off and you're wiggling a little bit, having been flattened.
Well, when Dino De Laurentiis called me in to do that movie, I actually wanted to play the love interest because I had played a number of roles like
Villains.
the Heartbreak Kid and Heaven Kuwait and like nasty jerk type guys. So I wanted to play the love interest, but they wanted me for the villain, the guy that captures Kong. And I said, this next to Bambi, this may be the second most beloved animal in film lore. And I don't want to be this guy. Now I'm going to capture Kong and be responsible ultimately for him being killed, and all of that. And Dino De Laurentiis made this big case that I was going to be the one that the audience identified with because of capitalism.
And you bought it?
He says, you go, you look for oil, find oil, you find a big ape, but what are you supposed to do? So they put the movie together, and when Kong escaped, he missed me and he stepped on me. That was the only thing they changed, because he missed him. He didn't kill him. That's how much they liked me and that character.
But
that
you're
movie.
wiggling after you've been stepped
Was
on.
it was? I don't remember
wiggling
that.
with it. It's
But
very
I'll tell
funny.
you about that Kong. They actually did have a 50-foot Kong on the back lot of MGM. And I remember walking in, and they could do a thing where he could like fix his eyes on you.
Yeah.
And even though you knew, I think they call an animatronic.